I've always considered myself someone who had his act together, but lately I've started questioning everything. The tipping point, my dad's 62nd birthday party, a night that flipped my world upside down. To set the scene, I'd been a cornerstone of our family business for 12 long years. It wasn't just a job, it was my life. Late nights, missed vacations, and countless sacrifices, all in the hope that I'd inherit the company one day. After all, wasn't that the unspoken promise? When you pour your soul into something, the party was grand, typical of my parents who loved showing off. The guest list had everyone. Family, friends, business associates, you name it. The atmosphere was lively, drinks were flowing, the food was incredible, and people were laughing and mingling. I was enjoying myself completely unaware of the storm brewing. Then came the toast. My dad stood up, glass in hand, and the room quieted. I expected the usual, a few dad jokes, a thank you to everyone, and maybe a bit about looking forward to retirement. Instead, he dropped a bombshell. He announced his retirement. And here's the kicker. Named my 22-year-old nephew Kyle as the next CEO. I froze. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Kyle, the kid barely out of business school, no real-world experience. Meanwhile, I'd been the one running the show for over a decade. My stomach dropped. The applause around the room felt like a betrayal. People congratulated Kyle as if he'd already proven himself worthy, while I sat there struggling to keep my composure. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate Kyle. He's fine for casual chats at family dinners. But CEO, the guy hadn't earned it. I built client relationships, managed teams, and grown the company year after year. And yet my dad handed over the reins to someone with a shiny degree and zero experience. I needed air. My wife found me moments later, my expression apparently giving me away. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. I just shook my head. "Not now," I muttered. I needed time to process the gut punch I'd just been dealt. Later that night, once the guests had left and the house was quiet, I confronted my dad. I was still clinging to the hope that there was some misunderstanding. Maybe Kyle's appointment was symbolic. Maybe I'd still play a key role. Nope, Dad doubled down, saying he believed Kyle's youth and fresh ideas were the future. Oh, and his degree, because apparently a diploma trumps over a decade of actual experience. You can mentor him, he added casually, as if throwing me a bone. That was the final straw. I couldn't stay, not as a subordinate to someone I knew wasn't ready. It wasn't about the title or the money. It was the principle. I'd earned that position, and being passed over was a slap in the face, so I resigned. It felt like cutting off a piece of myself, walking away from something I'd poured my life into. But staying would have been worse. My wife was my rock through it all. "You did the right thing," she told me. Her unwavering support meant everything. Because honestly, the rest of my family didn't get it. My mom begged me to reconsider. My dad even showed up unannounced one day, trying to guilt me into coming back, but I stood firm. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Not by a long shot. The weeks after I quit were a blur. At first I thought stepping away from the family business would bring me peace, but the weight of betrayal sat heavy on my chest. Every time I replayed the conversation with my dad, it stung all over again. I kept wondering if I'd been too rash. Maybe I could have handled it differently. But no matter how I turned it over in my mind, one thing stayed clear. I couldn't work under Kyle. Leaving was my only option. It wasn't just about me anymore. My wife reminded me that I deserved respect, not just loyalty. They didn't see your worth. She said one night as we talked in hushed voices on the couch, "Why would you stay and let them treat you like that?" Still, I couldn't help but keep tabs on the company. I told myself I didn't care. But let's be real. I cared a lot. This wasn't just a business to me. It was 12 years of my blood, sweat, and tears. So when the whispers started trickling in, I listened. It began with small things. A friend who still worked there messaged me out of the blue. "Kyle just fired. 3 senior managers said they didn't get his vision." I stared at my phone, half laughing, half fuming. These weren't just employees. They were the backbone of the company. People who'd helped build it from the ground up. Firing them was like shooting holes in a sinking ship. The next thing I heard, Kyle was restructuring contracts. Apparently he wanted to modernize our long-standing agreements with clients. That might have been fine if he'd done his homework. But Kyle, he bulldozed through years of carefully nurtured relationships. Clients were confused, frustrated, and then they started leaving, one by one. The names I'd worked so hard to secure disappeared from the roster. Still, my parents defended him. He just needs time. My mom told a mutual friend, he's figuring things out. Sure, figuring out how to tank the company, But then came the big one, financial fraud. From what I pieced together, Kyle tried to inflate the company's numbers to impress a major client. Rookie move. Not only did he get caught, but the fallout was brutal. The company's reputation, something I'd spent years building, was shredded. Clients bailed faster than rats on a sinking ship in lawsuits. Oh, they piled up. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I knew it was coming, but that didn't make it any easier to see. I didn't feel vindicated. Not really. Sure, part of me wanted to shout, "I told you so," but mostly it hurt. I'd poured over a decade into building something meaningful, and now it was crumbling in Kyle's hands. Worse, my parents still wouldn't admit they'd made a mistake. Every time someone brought up the company's struggles, they had an excuse. Kyle's under a lot of pressure. My mom would say he's still learning. No, he wasn't. He was floundering. The call started soon after old coworkers reached out venting about how bad things had gotten. "It's a disaster. One guy told me the office feels like a sinking ship. Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can stay." Hearing that was bittersweet. On the one hand, it felt good to know people appreciated the work I'd done. On the other hand, it reminded me how powerless I was to stop the mess Kyle was creating. This wasn't my problem anymore, and I wasn't about to get dragged back into it. Still, the guilt nagged at me, especially for the people who'd stuck by me for years. Meanwhile, my parents doubled down on their bad decisions. My sister Kyle's mom was his loudest cheerleader, insisting he was just misunderstood. "He's a visionary," she said at one point. A visionary. The guy couldn't even balance a budget. One day I ran into an old family friend at the grocery store. They asked, "How's the company doing under Kyle? Must be exciting to see him step up." I forced a smile and said, "Exciting isn't the word I'd use." They laughed, but I wasn't joking. By this point, I'd started brainstorming ideas for my own business. My wife encouraged me to move on to build something new, something that was mine. "You've got the skills," she said. "Why not take the leap?" It was scary, sure, but also exhilarating. For the first time in years, I was thinking about my future, not my family's expectations. Still, the shadow of the old company loomed over me. I tried to ignore the whispers about its decline, but they were impossible to avoid. Every new disaster felt like a reminder of how little my parents had valued my work. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going back. 6 months had passed since I'd walked out of the family business. I thought I'd finally moved on, but life had other plans. One afternoon, as I was going over some ideas for a new venture, the inevitable happened. My parents showed up at my doorstep. I opened the door to find them standing there looking older and more stressed than I'd ever seen them. My dad's jaw was tight, his hands shoved deep into his coat pocket. My mom had that look, the one she gave when she needed something but didn't want to admit it. "Can we come in?" Dad asked, his voice hesitant. I paused for a moment, debating whether to slam the door or hear them out. Eventually, I stepped aside and motioned them in. My wife caught my eye as she passed through the kitchen, her expression saying, "Everything, you've got this." She slipped upstairs, leaving me alone to face the music. We sat in awkward silence for a minute before my mom finally spoke. "We need your help," she said, her voice shaky. "The business, it's in trouble. Kyle made some mistakes, big ones." "No kidding." I just sat there letting the silence stretch. It was clear they wanted me to jump in to fix everything like I always had. I didn't. I waited until my dad spoke up. "He's in over his head," he admitted, rubbing his temples like the weight of the world rested there. "And now we're facing lawsuits, losing clients. We're barely hanging on." For years I dreamed of this moment. I imagined them coming to me, hats in hand, begging me to save the company. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt annoyed. It wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. "And what exactly do you expect me to do about it?" I finally asked. My tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't kind either. My mom reached out, placing her hand on mine. "You know the business better than anyone. We need you to come back, please." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For years, all I'd wanted was for them to see my value, to recognize everything I'd done. And now here they were, practically begging. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an insult. I pulled my hand away. "Why don't you ask Kyle?" I said, my voice steady. "He's the CEO, right? Let him fix it." My dad sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "We made a mistake," he said, his voice low. "We thought he'd bring something new to the table, but he wasn't ready." You were right. Hearing him admit that should have felt good, but it didn't. It just made me angrier. They'd had every opportunity to listen to me, but they didn't. And now they wanted me to clean up their mess. "I'm sorry," my mom said, her eyes welling up with tears. "We were wrong. We should have trusted you, but it's not too late. You can still fix this." I stood up and started pacing. the anger bubbling up despite my best efforts to stay calm. "You want me to fix it?" I asked, my voice rising. "You think I can just walk back in and magically make everything better? Do you even hear yourselves?" They didn't respond, and the silence only fueled my frustration. "You didn't trust me before, but now that you're desperate, I'm suddenly good enough. Do you even realize what you're asking? You want me to put my life on hold again? To bail you out of a situation you created?" "It's not about that," my dad said firmly. "It's about saving the company, saving our legacy." "Your legacy," I shot back. "Not mine. Not anymore." My mom broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. My dad just sat there staring at the floor like he didn't know what to do. For a moment I felt bad. They were my parents after all. But then I remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, the countless nights I'd stayed late while they praised Kyle for his good grades. "I can't help you," I said finally, my voice steady. "I won't. I've already started working on something for myself. I'm not going to throw that away to clean up your mess." My dad's face hardened. "So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on your family?" I laughed bitterly. "You turned your back on me first. Don't try to guilt me into this. It won't work." They left shortly after that. My mom was still sniffling, and my dad looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. As soon as the door closed behind them, I let out a shaky breath. My wife came downstairs and wrapped her arms around me. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "You don't owe them anything." She was right. I knew that, but it still hurt. Walking away from the company had been hard enough. Walking away from my parents, that was even harder. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything they'd said. A part of me wanted to step in. Not for them, but for myself, for the employees and clients who deserved better. But another part of me knew it wasn't my responsibility anymore. They'd made their choice. Now they had to live with it. After slamming the metaphorical door on my parents, something shifted in me. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. I'd spent too long stewing over what had happened, replaying the betrayal like a broken record. But now it was time to stop looking back and start figuring out my future. Starting from scratch was terrifying. I didn't have a fancy office, a team, or even a fully formed plan. What I did have were my skills, experience, and a fire in my belly to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own. Real estate was my wheelhouse, so that part was easy. But I didn't just want to recreate my dad's company. I wanted something better, something that reflected my values. My parents had always run their business like a machine, churning out deals with little regard for the people involved. I wanted to build something different, personal, human. I started small, reaching out to old clients I'd worked with for years. I explained that I was starting my own business and asked if they'd be interested in working together again. To my surprise, most of them were not only interested, they were thrilled. "We've been waiting for you to get back in the game," one client said. "Mike's been a disaster." Their enthusiasm was the confidence boost I needed. If they believed in me, maybe I could pull this off. After all. Next, I needed a team. That's where my old coworkers came in. I'd kept in touch with a few after leaving my dad's company and knew they were just as frustrated as I'd been. One by one, I made calls. "Hey, I'd say I'm putting something together. It's small right now, but I think it has potential. Are you interested?" The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Many of them had already left my dad's company, tired of the chaos under Kyle's leadership. "I've been waiting for this call." One person told me within a couple of weeks, I had a small but solid team. We didn't have a shiny office or state-of-the-art equipment, just a shared workspace and a lot of enthusiasm. It reminded me of the early days of my dad's company back when we were scrappy and hungry. Except this time, it was my vision, my rules. Setting up the business was a whirlwind between registering the company, building a website, and figuring out marketing. I barely had time to breathe, but every small win, a client signing on a lead turning into a deal, felt monumental. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of doubt when I questioned if I'd taken on more than I could handle. Balancing finances, logistics, and client relationships was overwhelming at times. But whenever I felt like giving up, I reminded myself why I was doing this. I wasn't just building a business. I was proving to myself that I could. The biggest challenge, though, was balancing work and my personal life. My wife was my rock through all of it, but I could see the stress in her eyes. She was working full-time while I poured every ounce of energy into my new venture. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up," she warned one night as I hunched over my laptop reviewing contracts. I know I admitted rubbing my temples, but if I don't push now, it'll never take off. She didn't argue, but her concern was a reminder that I needed to find a better balance. I made a mental note to figure it out, though I wasn't sure how just yet. Despite the stress, things started falling into place. Our first few deals went smoothly, and the feedback from clients was overwhelmingly positive. This feels like the old days, one of them said, when things were simpler, more personal. I miss this. Hearing that was like a shot of adrenaline. It validated everything I was working toward. Meanwhile, I couldn't ignore the news trickling in about my dad's company. Things were going from bad to worse. Clients were leaving in droves and the lawsuits were piling up. Employees were quitting faster than they could be replaced. It was hard not to feel a twinge of satisfaction, but mostly I felt sorry for the people caught in the crossfire. What surprised me most was how many of those people started coming to me. Former coworkers reached out asking if I was hiring clients who had stuck with my dad's company longer than I expected. Began contacting me. "If you're looking for more staff, let me know. One old colleague said I can't stand it here anymore. We've always trusted you." An old client emailed me. "Let's talk." I wasn't poaching. They came to me, and honestly, it felt good. These were people who recognized my value, who wanted to work with me because of what I brought to the table. By the end of the second month, we'd outgrown our shared workspace and started looking for a proper office. It was a small milestone, but to me, it felt huge. Standing in that empty space, imagining the possibilities, I couldn't help but smile. This was mine, all of it. No one could take it away from me. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And for the first time in years, I felt free. By the time my new business was gaining traction, the cracks in my family's empire had turned into chasms. Clients kept leaving. Employees were quitting en masse. Kyle, the golden boy, was nowhere to be found half the time. From what I heard through old coworkers, he'd practically stopped showing up to the office. Rumor had it he was drowning his stress at local bars during work hours. Meanwhile, my parents were scrambling desperately, trying to salvage what was left. I didn't gloat. I wasn't that petty. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel a little cathartic. This wasn't just about their bad decisions. It was about years of being overlooked, years of my work being taken for granted. Now, they were seeing the consequences. At first, they tried subtle ways to get me back. Emails from my dad started showing up in my inbox, all variations of the same plea. "Let's talk." "Or can we work this out?" I ignored them. Then came the calls from my mom. They started as once-a-week check-ins, but when I didn't answer, they turned into daily voicemails. One in particular stuck with me. Her voice trembled, a mix of anger and desperation. "I hope you're happy," she said. "You're tearing this family apart. I don't know how you can live with yourself." I deleted the voicemail without replying. What was there to say? They'd created this mess. They could clean it up. But the final straw came from my sister. Unlike my parents, who at least tried to appeal to my sense of duty, she went straight for the jugular. One day I received a letter from a lawyer. At first I thought it was a mistake, but as I read it, my stomach sank. My family was accusing me of stealing clients and employees. The letter claimed I was intentionally sabotaging their business by poaching key accounts and personnel. It was laughable. I checked my contract twice before resigning. There was no non-compete clause, no restrictions. They had no legal standing whatsoever. Still, the audacity of it infuriated me. Instead of reaching out to take responsibility for their failures, they were trying to pin it on me. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer with a simple note. "Handle this." He assured me it was an empty threat, and it was, but it still left a bad taste in my mouth. Not long after my parents showed up at my office unannounced. It was the first time they'd seen the new space, and I could tell it wasn't sitting well with them. My mom's lips were tight, her eyes darting around like she was judging every detail. My dad, on the other hand, just looked defeated. "Do you really think this is going to work?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the office. "You're playing a dangerous game." I leaned back in my chair, unbothered. "It's already working," I said simply, "and it's not a game." My mom's face flushed with anger. "You're ruining everything," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" To us, I stood up, keeping my voice calm but firm. "What I'm doing," I said, "is building something for myself, something you didn't think I was capable of. If that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine." They didn't stay long after that. I think they realized there was no point in trying to guilt me anymore. But their visit left me shaken. Not because of what they said, but because it confirmed something I had suspected for a while. This wasn't just about the business. It was about control. For years, I'd been the dependable one, the one they could count on to keep things running smoothly, the one who sacrificed nights, weekends, and vacations to make their dream a reality. And now that I was gone, they didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. Clients were signing on, employees were motivated, and the team was growing. I even hired a marketing firm to help us expand, and the results were almost immediate. Inquiries started pouring in one night as I was reviewing our financials. My wife walked in with a glass of ginger ale. She sat down next to me, resting her head on my shoulder. "You know," she said, "I don't think I've ever seen you this happy." I smiled, setting the papers aside. "It feels good," I admitted, building something for myself, not answering to anyone else. She wrapped her arms around me. "You deserve this." Her words stayed with me long after she went to bed. For so long, I'd been chasing someone else's approval. My parents, my family, even Kyle in some twisted way. But now I was finally doing something for me. And for the first time in years, I didn't care what anyone else thought. Months passed, and the gap between my new life and my family's crumbling business grew wider. My team had settled into our new office, and the steady growth of the business gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the clients or the deals. It was about the freedom of building something on my own terms. Meanwhile, the news from my parents' company was grim. A former coworker who'd recently joined my team filled me in on the details. The lawsuits had drained them financially, and clients were still leaving in droves. My dad was forced to sell the office building our company's home since day one. Hearing that was surreal. It's practically a ghost town over there. My coworker said the few employees left are only staying because they have nowhere else to go. It wasn't schadenfreude I felt. If anything, I just felt done. The building, the company, even the legacy I had helped create. It wasn't mine anymore. It was a relic of a life I'd outgrown. Then, one day I got an email from my dad. The subject line read, "An apology." I almost deleted it without reading it. After everything that had happened, what could he possibly say? But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. To my surprise, it wasn't a plea for help or an attempt to guilt me. It was an actual apology. "I thought I was doing what was best for the family," he wrote, "but I see now that I let my pride get in the way. I listened to your sister because I didn't want to admit I was wrong about Kyle. You were the one who deserved that position, and I'm sorry for not recognizing it sooner." The email went on, recounting moments from the past I hadn't thought about in years. He admitted how much he'd relied on me in the early days, and how the company wouldn't have survived without my contributions. Toward the end, he wrote something that stuck with me. "I know I can't fix what's happened, but I hope someday you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." I closed the email without replying. Forgiveness is complicated. I wasn't angry anymore, not really, but I wasn't ready to let them back into my life either. They were still clinging to the past, and I'd worked too hard to leave it behind. My business continued to grow slowly but steadily. Former clients of my dad's company kept reaching out looking for stability in the chaos Kyle had created. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to feel like I was capitalizing on their downfall, but after talking with a few of them, I realized they weren't just looking for a deal. They wanted someone they could trust. By the time we moved into an even bigger office, I had a team I was proud of and clients who genuinely appreciated what we offered. It wasn't about proving my parents wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive on my own. As for Kyle, the last I heard, he'd moved back in with my sister. The lawsuits had been settled, but the financial damage was done. From what I gathered, he was trying to find himself, which was a nice way of saying he was lost. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd been handed an opportunity he wasn't ready for, and he squandered it. That was on him. My sister predictably wasn't handling the fallout well. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that she'd grown bitter, blaming everyone but herself for how things turned out. My parents, once her staunchest defenders, had stopped making excuses for her. It was strange seeing the family dynamics unravel from the outside. For years, I'd let their expectations, their disappointment, and their manipulation define me. But now, I was free. One day, as I sat in my office looking out at the city skyline, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't trying to prove myself to people who would never value me. I was building something for myself, for my wife, for the people who believed in me. And that was enough. I don't know if I'll ever fully reconcile with my family. Maybe someday. When the dust has truly settled, we'll find a way to mend the broken pieces. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'm okay with it. For the first time in years, I'm looking forward, not back. And for the first time in years, my future feels like my own. I thought that would be the end of it, a clean line between what was theirs and what was mine. But endings in families never happen on schedule. They drift, bleed, and show up in envelopes you don't expect. It was a Thursday morning when the certified letter arrived. The green card hung off the corner like a hospital bracelet. I signed, tore it open at the kitchen counter, and felt the floor tilt under my feet. Subpoena. I was being called as a witness in a financial investigation into my parents' company. The state wanted records, emails, any documentation I might have from the years I ran operations. The letter named 3 people directly: my father, my sister, and Kyle. I stood there in the quiet, the refrigerator humming behind me, the scent of my wife's ginger and honey tea still in the air, and realized something simple and ugly. You can walk away from a building, a title, a paycheck, but you can't walk away from your signature. My wife found me reading it a third time. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She said, "Okay, what do you need?" That's the difference between comfort and partnership. I took a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Evan," I said. Evan was our old controller, the validator in my story, if you're keeping score, quiet, precise, allergic to drama. He'd left 2 months after me, disgusted by Kyle's modernization. I called him that afternoon. He didn't even say hello. "You got the letter," he said. "I figured today or tomorrow." What am I walking into? A pause, a paper shuffle. They're looking at 3 things: off-book liabilities, misrepresented revenue, and forged board minutes. His tone didn't change on the last part, but the word forged sat in the room like smoke. Forged by who? Another paper shuffle. "I can't tell you that over the phone," he said, "but you already know." I didn't, not really. I had suspicions, dozens of little puzzle pieces I'd shoved into a drawer labeled "not my problem." They had just dumped themselves onto my kitchen table. The state investigator's office was colder than it needed to be. A plant in the corner was losing a slow war with fluorescent light. The investigator, Morales, was blunt without being cruel. She slid a file across the table. I didn't touch it. "We're not after you," she said. "We're after the truth." Under different circumstances, that might have sounded like a line. That day, it felt like oxygen. The top sheet was a timeline, colored lines, meetings, wire transfers with neat little timestamps. The second page was a scan of board minutes, my father's signature in thick blue ink, the date on top set to exactly 1 week before his party. I recognized the font. I'd written enough minutes to know, but the language was off. The cadence wasn't mine. A line jumped out like a siren in traffic. "Unanimous consent to appoint Kyle Whitaker interim CEO until such time as the board votes to make permanent." Unanimous. I wasn't there to consent. I hadn't been told there was a vote. Morales flipped another page. "We've got metadata that says these minutes were created 3 days after they were signed and printed on a different machine than usual. The initials in the footer don't match your standard. We pulled versions from cloud backups. Whoever drafted these forgot to turn off track changes on the first pass." She let that hang. I realized I was gripping the edge of the chair. "Who drafted them?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Morales slid the last page forward an email chain, my sister's account on top forwarding a draft to my mother and Kyle. The subject line, "Finalizing minutes before the party." No one in the thread had included my dad's account, but on the second to last forward there it was his name, a red receipt timestamped 2 minutes after the email was sent at 2:13 a.m. Was he awake? Morales asked. Did he read them? Did he understand? We'll find out. But the pattern is clear. I stared at the line of CCs at my sister's cheerful sign-off. "Almost there, speak tomorrow," and felt something in me crack and set differently, like a bone that had been aching for years finally finding a cast. Kyle hadn't stolen my job. He'd been used as a blunt instrument by someone who had learned to play my parents like a piano. Why, I asked. It was a child's word, but it was all I had. Morales tapped the timeline. "Here's my theory. Cash crunch. Your father took out a bridge loan against receivables when interest rates were low. Then Kyle modernized the contracts, and those receivables weren't so receivable. Meanwhile, someone, she didn't say my sister's name, was moving cash between accounts to keep up appearances. They needed a figurehead to blame when the music stopped, and I was the only one who knew where the skeletons weren't," I said, and heard how bitter that sounded. Morales didn't smile. "You're a very tidy man," she said. "Untidy people don't like tidy men. The funny thing is, I might have been tempted to help a year earlier. I would have sacrificed my sanity to keep the company's bones intact. But standing in that cold office, I had new bones to protect. My team, my clients, the thing I'd built without asking permission. So I did what I do, I documented. I spent 3 nights in my home office pulling email threads, delivery schedules, signed SOWs, all the normal stuff that proves you are who you say you are and did what you said you did. I gave the investigator everything she asked for and nothing she didn't. I answered questions without editorializing. I said I don't recall when I didn't. I said, here's the file when I did. I slept for once like a person who has told the truth for 12 straight hours. The call from the revealer came on a Sunday, not Evan, not Morales, a vendor. Hey, he said, voice low like we were kids, trading contraband. I'm not supposed to send you this, but I think you should see it. It was a PDF of a recent RFP response my parents' company had submitted, except the response included a pasted image at the end, a photo of a whiteboard with strategy brainstorm with my name written across the top in black marker, my name underlined twice. I hadn't been there. The room in the photo wasn't even from our old office. It was a co-working hub with neon words on the wall. Whoever had written my name had copied it from an old agenda I'd posted to our internal Slack years ago. Same weird little hook on the Y, same unnecessary double underline. The past used as a mask for the present, sloppy in a way that insults your intelligence because it assumes you won't look too hard. I sent it to Morales. I didn't include a note. I didn't need to. Evan called an hour later. That whiteboard. They used it to keep a client who now wants out on grounds of misrepresentation. They're naming you in their complaint, said you were in the room promising deliverables. There it was, the moment the train rounds the curve and you finally see the wreck you've been hearing about. Send me the complaint, I said. I read it on my phone in the living room, the sun angling across the rug, dust motes floating like slow fireworks. I laughed once, short and mean, when I hit the sentence where I supposedly guaranteed a timeline I'd never seen for a product I would never have approved. My wife put her hand on my knee. Okay, she said, what do we do? We make sure the innocent land on their feet, I said, and we stop pretending accidents are accidents. Depositions are nothing like TV. There's no sweeping oratory, no dramatic gallery gasps, just hum, question, answer, objection, rephrase your own breath too loud in your ears. The mechanical cluck of a stenographer's tiny machine. My father's deposition was scheduled a week after mine. I didn't want to be there. I went anyway. He looked smaller in that chair. Tired. I saw the man who had taught me to tie a tie and check a lease line by line with a ruler, and I saw the man who had stood up with a champagne flute and torched my career in 12 sentences. Both were true. The court reporter swore him in. The opposing counsel started slow. Mr. Whitaker, who drafted the board minutes dated the week before your retirement party. My daughter circulated the drafts, he said. His voice caught on daughter in a way he couldn't pretend to cough away. And did you read them? Yes, he said, but I didn't understand all of it. And did you sign them on the date indicated? He swallowed. No, he said finally. I signed them the night before the party. I felt the room get still in that specific way humans get still when a thing they expected is finally said out loud. The sky outside the narrow window was still blue. It felt obscene. Why did you appoint Kyle over your son? He looked down at his hands. They were clean nails, buffed by someone who had time now to care about such things. I thought a young face would fix things, he said, and for the first time it sounded like the truth instead of the party line. And he stopped, exhaled. My daughter said it was the only way to keep our lender calm. He glanced at the door like her name might be written on it. Did your daughter have personal liabilities associated with that lender? The attorney asked. Objection. Withdrawn. The air tasted like pennies. He didn't look at me as he left the room. That hurt more than I expected. If this were the kind of story where revenge shows up in a red bow, the next scene would be me buying the old office at auction and turning it into a community hub with a neon sign that read, "We don't do nepotism here." But life is more practical than poetry. The building went to a developer. They planned condos. I didn't fight it. Ghosts needed fewer doorways to haunt. What I did instead was less cinematic and more useful. We hosted a job fair in our new space and invited every ex-employee from my parents' company. We made coffee and borrowed percolators and set out boxes of grocery store cookies. We printed resumes for free. We quietly covered 3 months' COBRA premiums for the employees we knew were one paycheck away from disaster. I didn't post about it. I didn't send a press release. I went home that night with the smell of copier toner in my hair and slept like a person who had built a bridge and watched people walk across. The lawsuits settled one by one. Some clients were made partially whole by insurance. Others wrote off their losses and swore to vet family businesses more carefully. My sister hired a new lawyer every other month and went on Facebook Live twice to explain how she'd been misunderstood and maligned. Kyle vanished from the internet like a spill mopped off tile. You could still see the outline if you knew where to look, but casual passersby would miss it. The investigator called me on a Tuesday with the last piece. "Charges are being filed," Morales said. "Your sister for fraud and falsifying corporate documents. Your father is cooperating. Kyle's named but unlikely to see jail time if he continues to cooperate. We wanted you to hear it from us." I thanked her. I didn't feel triumphant. Relief is the quiet cousin of joy. It doesn't throw a party. It just lets you take a deeper breath. 2 months later, I was locking up the office when I saw a figure sitting on the lobby bench. The same bench where delivery guys leave boxes and interns eat hurried lunches. My father. No entourage, no polished watch. Just a canvas jacket and a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hands. "I didn't call," he said, standing too quickly. "I didn't think you would answer." We ended up in the conference room. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dry erase ink. "I'm not here to talk you into anything," he said. "I know the time for that is gone." He set a small box on the table. "These are yours." Inside were old client thank you notes, the kind written with actual pens by people who meant it. A photo of me at 24 in a tie that didn't fit standing proudly next to a leased office sign. My first leather portfolio, edges scuffed to, not patina, just scuffed. And at the bottom, a manila envelope with copies of board minutes from 6 years ago, mine in my cadence, my initials in the footer.